I think membership, Rennie, as a structure is very critical in solving a lot of these problems. Of course, at the moment, the world does have a lot of problems to face, whether we're talking about net zero, whether we're talking about health and safety issues, whether we're talking about personal safety issues. Yes, I think actually membership's never been more relevant as a way of solving the world's issues. And membership has been a very old historical way of solving world's issues and problems.
Welcome to the Stakeholder Impact Forum, a platform created by Casaris to explore how member organisations can drive meaningful change across their ecosystems. Through interviews with industry leaders, the forum uncovers practical insights into stakeholder engagement, community building, and creating measurable impact. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Mervyn Pilley. Mervyn's a seasoned membership professional with a career spanning over 5 decades, beginning in accountancy and evolving into a lifelong commitment to member-led organisations. So what will you learn today? In this wide-ranging conversation, Mervyn shares his reflection on the evolving role of membership bodies in society, the urgent need to address diverse member needs, and rethinking what membership can achieve in today's world.
Mervyn, great to have you today. Let's jump right into the first question. You've worked across a huge range of sectors and organizations in the past, and in your view, why are membership organizations uniquely positioned to tackle today's societal and economic challenges?
I think membership, Rennie, as a structure is very critical in solving a lot of these problems. Of course, at the moment, the world does have a lot of problems to face, whether we're talking about net zero, whether we're talking about health and safety issues, whether we're talking about personal safety issues. Yes, I think actually membership's never been more relevant as a way of solving the world's issues. And membership has been a very old historical way of solving world's issues and problems going back many, many centuries. But today, with the way the internet's operating and helping people to live their lives, I think membership in multiple ways can help solve the problems. Yes, as a structure, I think I might have told you before that I'm a passionate believer in the cooperative movement, for example, and how the cooperative movement in the UK and indeed worldwide is changing a lot of things to do with both membership and indeed business models, membership models. It's really a very effective way of bringing people together, people with common themes, common aims, common issues, and using the power of that organization to change the world. In fact, I have got probably hopefully some examples that will really hopefully demonstrate that.
You even got one step further in our previous calls, and you advocated previously on membership engineering, as you called it, and even envisioned a World Membership Council. Would you like to share a little bit more?
Well, yes.
What kind of impact it could create?
Yes, a slightly fanciful dream of mine. Yes, well, should I invent things? My late father invented a lot of things in his life, but should I invent things? The concept of membership engineering, yes, because I think if you look at engineering as a profession, it's all about solving challenges, solving problems. And as I've just mentioned, I think membership is a way of doing that. The membership model. So bringing membership and engineering together as a concept. Is it particularly unusual or unique? No, not really. I just really used it for a few presentations and a few ideas to a few events where I was just trying to sort of not quite sell the art of membership, but just, bring that aspect of membership to the public attention, really. The World Membership Council, I happen to know David Gottfried quite well, gentleman in the US who created what was the US Green Building Council originally, then as now the World Green Building Council, and perhaps a model of membership that I'd like to bring up in a subsequent question. But yes, I know him quite well. I had a chat with him over LinkedIn, certainly during the pandemic, around the whole concept of whether we could use that model in not just in fact in membership, but in other sectors. Yes, it's something I've always wanted to do, and take that forward. Unfortunately, my career, the way it's going, is I'm probably going to run out of time in my career before I can actually achieve that. But that's the intention with the membership engineering concept.
Let's go back to the impact you mentioned earlier that member organizations really can create. And you said that they can create equal impact for both their members on the one hand, but also society as a whole by really solving big and small local and global challenges. How can we do that? How can we deliver this vision of yours?
I think actually I will use, and apologies for using the same example, but I think the World Green Building Council model is almost unique, and it's in the way it is solving problems and challenges directly. both for its members, but also for society as a whole. So I think it's almost the ultimate way that membership model can actually be done to achieve that. So basically, in simple terms, the World Green Building Council was set up by David Gottfried, 1990s, early 1990s. But what they've done is they've very, very cleverly used the overall concept to create other models of building councils within continents, within countries. So I think there's about 140 odd versions of the Green Building Council model operating in pretty much every country in the world. And it's unique because it allows local governance. So in each country, governance might be very different to other countries. The structure that you would want, the challenges that you would need. And of course, it's ultimately around net zero. It's around the environmental issues, the major issues the world faces, 1.50, it's a temperature, etc. So that model has really created quite an unusually unique set of circumstances. So you have the members who are feeding into that council. The members tend to be solution providers, tend to be stakeholders, tend to be people who can help provide the solutions in each country. But then, of course, for the general wider population and public, there's a lot of information resource coming out of those centres, a lot of stakeholder discussions. Yeah, it's really a strong, most dynamic structure. And in fact, I do continually suggest people buy his book, David Gottfried's book, because I've never seen a more dynamic structure set up that has succeeded quite so much in achieving solutions in that net 30 odd plus year period of that's been in place. As I said, pretty much unique because there are not that many models of membership that have really gone around the world and do span a very substantial part of the world.
I suppose it sounds like quite an inspiring case study, but why is it unique? Why, if it's that dynamic and having that much impact, why do you think it's so unique?
Well, I think it's unique simply, if nothing else, Jonathan, because normally I think the reason that many membership organizations really struggle to be global and often they just focus on the country they're occupying or, all right, perhaps some further extensions if it's partly things like Commonwealth countries or Europe, etc. The big difference that the model worked was that whatever they made, when they set the original concept up, they really did want it to work in any country, irrespective of whether that country is a dictatorship, a totalitarian government-based country, whether there are no charitable structures available in that country, there are no cooperative models. It really does adapt the model of membership to suit that particular country. But there's a common theme. So whilst you've got the separate ability to have the different governance structure, you've got the overarching way that the structure works. So ultimately it's membership meeting activity, it's provision of information. Some green building councils have slightly different structures where they might provide some training, other services as well. But yeah, that's the reason I think it's pretty unique, because I've not come across, unless you take something as really major movement, which is the cooperative movement. Now, yes, I would say there, you could argue that it's such a broad movement that the cooperative movement is worldwide, and there are pretty well structured areas of movement around the world. Again, slightly different because cooperatives are structured slightly differently, and obviously cover a much bigger range of sectors. And intriguingly, in terms of solving problems and solving the world's challenges, that's the other factor is, yes, the co-ops are certainly solving a lot of challenges, but in terms of actually solving one of our biggest challenges, perhaps saving the planet is a hackneyed phrase and perhaps not necessarily appropriate. I don't think there's more direct action come out of the process than has come out of the work that the green building councils do.
This leads me immediately to my next question. There are organizations that you mentioned that have a big purpose, a big vision, a mission that is solving the challenges we are facing globally or locally. But there are member organizations that maybe don't see it like that. They think we are just here for our members. We want to help them to do whatever they want to do. So my question would be, are membership organizations aware of the power they have to solve local and global challenges?
Good question, Rennie, and yes, and that's why I mentioned the word sell to the membership. So when I was presenting on membership engineering, I think most membership bodies, most membership organizations, it was intriguing because, interestingly enough, I think for a long time the world of membership, and I'm going to use the word membership professionals, so people like myself who practice and have worked full time in the membership sector for a long time, I don't think that as a profession was ever quite recognized. I don't, in fact, one of my earliest phases was trying to get a career progression in membership professional sector as a career, also membership education to educate people. And to be fair, a lot of my generation and my colleagues and friends and people I've known for a long time who've all been involved in the membership space, we fell into the sector. So we sort of were engineers. I was an accountant. We had other careers. We had other qualifications. And all of a sudden, in my case, purely because of my passion for all things membership, I suddenly found myself running a trade association full time. Now, in that circumstance, of course, yes, your first most important understanding has to be the members, what the members are looking for. As you move through and work certainly in some sectors, and that's the other factor I think is important to your question, collaboration tends to happen more in broader, wider sectors. And the sector I'm currently involved with, which is construction, is a good example of that. You have multiple professions and multiple trades all within one under the built environment banner or the construction banner. And in that sort of sector, and again, I can give you an example of something like the Construction Industry Council, where they brought together a lot of the individual professional bodies, trade bodies within the sector, and are working to provide a collaboration piece. Collaboration is very difficult. And yes, if you're running a small professional body, we're not a particularly large professional body. We've got 9,000 members where I'm working at the moment. Some of them have 30,000 members, 40,000. I think if you're global and you have that sort of size of membership, you would certainly understand how what you're doing can influence more broadly. We have about 1,000 overseas members. So you could say, well, how on earth can we influence what's going on in the rest of the world? And certainly we do have limitations in some countries. I think the pandemic made a massive difference to collaboration. Certainly the structure I was involved with then, we were very focused around UK activity and UK events and UK, activities specifically. And to be honest, we never had a budget for a lot of international collaboration and global collaboration. It was only really when everyone switched to Zoom and Teams and other methods of communicating that all of a sudden I was having meetings with India, with Africa, with Canada, with Australia, with US. So many meetings, in fact, that at some point in time I got a little bit merging them together. That was what really moved the goalposts in terms of solving bigger challenges. Yeah, I think that's critical. But you're right. You can't just assume that membership unaided or any one membership body is going to in itself be able to do everything you'd want to do. We have budget constraints. We have members. Some members may not understand, but some members may just want to join a professional body or a membership body just for the badge, for the post-nominal letters after their name, for the kudos, for the certificate. I would say one thing about membership, which I think is really relevant, and that's what is common to everyone. The 80-20 rule, Pareto principle, absolutely applies. Without a shadow of a doubt. Everything I've looked at in membership, the 80-20 rule applies, whether it's committee, whether it's type of member, whether it's what the member wants to get involved in. 80% of the members tend to just want the badge, just want the post-nominal, just want the certificate. It's the 20% that I think are the people who want to change things, want to be dynamic, move things forward. The art of collaboration, and there are some more successful collaborations than others. I tried to launch a collaborative movement in the pandemic, which has achieved some success, but not as much as I would have hoped, because post-pandemic things changed back again to a certain extent, which was disappointing. We went back from, we still have the international meetings, but they are less frequent. And I don't think, to be fair, unless you jump on a plane now and follow it up with a physical meeting, it's less likely to happen, which is a shame. So, yeah, I do think there are some good examples where that collaboration can happen. But ultimately, back to that professional piece, the membership professional. Yeah, that's the reason I'm membership engineering. I was presenting to membership leaders, professional body leaders at the time. That was one of the reasons I came up with that concept, because I said, look, guys and ladies, we can change things. We have the power. The other slight challenge there, which also was a difficulty for me, was the lack of government engagement in the power of membership, which is disappointing because governments in the past had Michael Heseltine in 1992 very clearly set up a structure in the UK to engage with trade associations for policy creation. Regrettably, several governments later, trade associations are not in favour. The big corporates are, the bigger corporate players are. So I still believe in the power of membership, the collaboration abilities of membership. But yeah, to really make, and of course the other geopolitical situation has gone so crazily out of focus at the minute, it's even harder to affect change, but I'm not giving up.
The main purpose of this initiative, the Stakeholder Impact Forum, is to really to uncover the most profound and the strongest examples of how member organizations can create positive impact on the one hand, but also how they can use this impact to create engagement. And we have kind of 4 key leading themes we want to explore within every interview, which is storytelling, part of our own initiative, stakeholder listening to really understand what people need and how we can support them in these needs, created experiences, and community building. And I feel all 4 of them belong into your own vision and into what you've been trying to do. Shall we start with storytelling? So, because this was so central to your current work, can you maybe share one example of some impactful storytelling that communicated membership organizations' value and impact to the wider audience they are talking with?
Yes, we're in fact, so the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists, which is my current professional body I'm working with, I was brought in to try and do something quite major, which is actually to tell the world about what an architectural technologist is. Bizarrely, bearing in mind we're 60 years old and we've had a Royal Charter for 20 years, there is still an alarming number of people, even people within the built environment, let alone people, the public or people outside of the built environment, who really don't understand what an architectural technologist is. They tend to think that they are a failed architect or, an architect who doesn't want to design any big, powerful buildings, but they just want to be an architect. That's not the case. And the storytelling aspect that really has grabbed my attention. On our website, we have about 7 very good professionally produced films, and they're all different aspects of what an architectural technologist does, whether it's conservation work, whether it's energy efficiency work, whether it's academic work. And basically, we are taking young people at the moment, mainly through degree programs, where obviously it's down to the professor or down to the course leader to be the storyteller, to convince the young people what they're doing, why they're on that program. But the storytelling for me and what I'm trying to do at the minute within limited constraints of a budget, where you're trying to be a Hollywood film producer and you've literally got enough to be able to get enough for a small video on a website, is to tell a story about how architectural technologists, because they understand how a building works, the science and the physics of that building, and they can combine that holistically with the design of the building, they are absolutely the right people to be working on retrofit work, providing solutions, energy management solutions, building control solutions. So huge amount of potential, and also, to be fair, highly relevant in the current climate we're in the UK, where we're trying to build a lot of houses in a hurry. We're trying to make sure the houses are built effectively and most sustainably, rather than what's happened in the past, where we've been building houses that are going to need to be retrofitted because we haven't built them properly, we haven't designed them properly. So again, our members are uniquely placed in many ways to understand that what they're doing could have major impacts on just about every aspect of our net zero target, which of course it's set in stone, it's set in legislation, despite the current negativity flying around, which isn't helping that storytelling, I have to say, because the storytelling is across many different audiences, whether it's a local authority, whether it's private householder, whether it's a property developer, whether it's a landlord, but I'm so far, what have I achieved? We've used the films more widely. We've taken part in a few exhibitions, both within the built environment, and we've tried to engage with some bigger organizations. There is some good collaboration going on in our sector, which helps. There's something called the National Retrofit Hub, which is a big piece of work around research, around understanding of the sector. We're sort of using that mouthpiece to get that story out. The final piece perhaps on that point is for the young people. I mentioned young people. We have a massive story to tell. I believe in primary school, any young person, any of any age, really, from the minute they can read and walk and talk. To me, that story needs to get to that age group, because I'm retiring soon, and we're finding a lot of our students, university graduates, a lot of universities are stopping their programs because they can't financially make them work. We still need to get young people into our sector. And one thing I would always say, don't reinvent the wheel if someone else is doing it, and there are some good existing models. But yeah, storytelling for me, it's part of marketing. It's the most effective part of marketing for me, really, is using that storytelling. Marketing, especially in the world of where we're in now in social media, I think you've just got to, there's so much noise and a blizzard of noise. You've got to both be concise with the message, but that doesn't mean to say you can't have an awful lot of fun doing it. And the videos we've made, they all predate me, I have to say. That I had no control over the films at all, but I have to say, looking at them, some really innovative ideas, using a rapper, for example, to come in and talk about or sing about some of the work we're doing. Yeah, unusual and different, but yeah, storytelling I'll never stop being interested in stories. As someone who's loved books all his life, I will never stop being interested in stories, but using that into the membership zone to help promote what we're trying to do.
That's really interesting, because I was going to ask you about cutting through the noise. I think in every aspect of society, we're all in content overload. We all have far too much content hitting our brains all the time. Aside from that, you mentioned that you've got all these different stakeholders, these different types of people, even in that sector. Do you think that anyone is doing something that is actually having an impact in terms of telling the same story for multiple different stakeholders? You just mentioned it there, that you've got different kind of pockets that you need to get the same message over to, but perhaps they're all slightly interested in different stuff. Do you stay super general, or are you finding that there's more success in really pinpoint and targeting specific people, left alone organizations?
Yes, and there are times when there's a big downside to collaboration. So there's a huge plus to it. And I think I mentioned already the Construction Industry Council, which is perhaps a good example where you have got a broad set of professions coming together to bring a lot of discussion through committees. Invariably, it's always going to be a working group or a committee structure. I'm working hard, as I have done most of my life. Actions have to speak louder than words, which I think is critical. To be honest, we don't have much time for a lot of these things. Now, yes, am I happy in some ways where collaboration pieces are more about meetings and committees and minutes and agendas, and you look at what's been achieved? That, to me, is the disappointment. But again, I have to say about the fact of the record of government involvement in those recommendations, those discussions, because ultimately, of course, membership can influence and can perhaps help and direct and inform. But ultimately, what any membership collaboration piece can't do, of course, is to create policy, can't spend taxpayers' money. It can spend its members' money. And again, in some areas of collaboration, its members' money can be quite effectively used. But there equally are times when, and again, as CIET, Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists, I'm taking a view, well, look, try and punch above our weight. There are some advantages of the World Wide Web and the internet and the social media. You can do a lot that you would never have been able to do in the past. When I started working a long time ago, we had none of these advantages. Letters and fax machines were not a good way of getting that rapid message out. But focusing the message, yeah, I'm trying still to talk with people who understand the marketing sector far better. And I'm married to a chartered marketer, so I'm trying to engage with marketers and social media and people who understand young people, because I have an 8-year-old grandson, but that doesn't mean I understand young people and what they want and what they need. We need to engage with teachers through STEM programs. We're trying to engage with young people through that sort of route, and sometimes not collaborating too much and having a direct focus on what we're doing, what architectural technology is doing, I think is better, because construction is such a broad topic, built environment is such a broad area, that for us to go into a school, as I did as a construction youth ambassador many years ago in the 90s, and talk to school young people about careers, things have changed. But yes, it's interesting how that collaboration piece and how that can cut through noise, as opposed to, I think it sometimes is harder, Jonathan, for that collaboration to get that message out as clearly and as succinctly as I think an individual membership structure can do on its own, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Perfect. I think what you just said around, how should I say, around understanding different stakeholders, around understanding different groups of audiences you want to address, leads me to my next section and next question, which is stakeholder listening, as I already said earlier. Do you have one strong example where stakeholder listening helped one particular organization to really recreate or improve their engagement strategy and create more value and a better offering for their members?
Yes, I think, and you're going to think this is ridiculous because I've had zero ability to run. Probably our largest membership body and organisation in the UK is the National Trust. In terms of member democracy and member engagement, for many, many years, I think they were an absolute leader in the field of understanding. I mean, about 4 million members. So when you've got 4 million members, you've got a big, and also when you're trying to do a lot of different things, like you're obviously trying to preserve heritage, you're trying to preserve land, you're trying to do a number of different areas. Now, they had quite a difficult period, but I still feel in terms of understanding what the members were looking for and engaging with members, then I think that's a really blue chip example of how that listening, but it is difficult because I go back to the 80-20 rule. 80-20 applies, and I believe it applies to virtually every membership organisation in terms of the type of member. I've had some really weird and wonderful discussions with some of the 20% of members who want to change everything about the organisation, about the structure, the sector. I've had evening after an event, I had a really 2-hour debate with someone who wanted to literally change the face of the profession he was working in. And it was a very old profession, the Victorian sector that I was involved in at the time. And yeah, he wanted to rewrite the education manual. He wanted to rewrite the way the sector was working. And I said, Jeff, with great respect, this is a very old traditional sector. Why do you think you can do this? And he said, oh, you're not listening to the members. And I said, well, you're one member and I'm more than happy to have a very long discussion with you. But we do, of course, have another, God, I've forgotten how many members we had at the time, about 4,000. And that's the challenge. So the biggest challenge for membership and communities and any sort of membership structure is how you can't keep the old adage, you can't keep all of the people happy all of the time. I think unfortunately has to apply. It's got a little interesting because the other thing the pandemic did was a lot of membership organizations have been very old fashioned. They haven't necessarily gone to digital voting. If meetings are held physically, of course, that often means if you're a national or even international organization, you can't always get as many people into a room as you would like, a physical room. That's been one of the most disappointing things. And I'm engaged in it. I can't really name the organization because it's proving too controversial in a minute, but I'm engaged at the moment. An organization who are desperate. They're 120 years old. They're desperate to move to digital voting. But there's so much tradition in the sector. I feel like Topol singing in Fiddler on the Roof. There's so much tradition in that sector that even trying to get digital voting has proved very, very hard and very, very difficult. And I've been saying, well, why? Because you would want democracy. You would want to listen to what your members say. They are live streaming. They're doing a number of different ways of bringing people in. And I'm not saying that's not happening, but it has happened. But yes, it's interesting. And then once you say you listen, of course you have got to listen, you still have to balance up the balancing act between keeping stakeholders happy. There are occasions when you get a majority of members who want to do a certain thing. And that's when you have a committee or a council, or in some cases you have a CEO. And someone has to take the objective view and say, look, what can we achieve? How can we best do this without upsetting the rest of the sector, without upsetting the government? Because if you upset government, they have long memories, or civil servants tend to have quite long memories about what you did and what you didn't do and what you weren't cooperating with. I've had one membership organisation who were pretty much I think they would have had a rebellion if they could have had their way. But yeah, I've had engagement with members where they've said, well, we just don't think this is happening. The government's not doing anything like the right thing. We think we should be holding protests, having a protest meeting. We should organise a lobbying campaign. I said, well, okay, I'm listening, but the reality is, we have to work with others. We have to collaborate. Best example, as I said, National Trust, I think originally was a really strong example with a lot of members. When you've got 4 million, I suspect that's the ultimate in trying to keep everybody happy all of the time. Listening as well, yes. I mean, the smaller, right at the very opposite end, I set up a community for my last trade association I ran, which was in energy efficiency, and I set up a small community there of behavior change experts in the energy efficiency field. We ended up with about 200 members of the community. And we listened, and because they were behavior change experts and we were trying to change people's behaviors in the environment, so and it wasn't just about switching off a light bulb or whatever, it was a bit more sophisticated than that. Some really exciting and interesting engagement with people who had some really positive ideas about how to change things. Yeah, I almost wanted to do a psychology course after that experiment, but yeah, so both ends of the spectrum, but as I say, unfortunately, you can't keep everybody happy all of the time, which of course politicians understand completely. But for membership organisations, it's difficult. Democracy has to win. If you have a basic 50% majority vote structure, that's fine. If you have a different structure, it can make for some interesting subsequent events. But no, on the whole, if you don't listen, you don't understand. If we don't understand the members, there is absolutely no point in having the membership organisation. We really can't. God, if people thought they could just carry on running a membership organisation and they were ignoring the members, they would lose all the members. So retention, everyone talks about retention. Well, of course, that is the ultimate retention. You soon know you've lost your members if you don't renew.
Okay, if we go to the next phase, which is really creating experiences, curate these experiences, could be events, could be any other type of format we want, both virtual and physical. If you take these experiences, do you think any example that was really strong to either bring the story to life with a scenario in a real life environment, or help to build engagement between members, or started to build community? Anything that comes into your mind when it comes to experiences and how to use them? Yes,
I think so. I've had some both very positive experiences, and I've had to say had some very bad experiences. And unfortunately, you won't be too surprised. The pandemic was a very, very challenging period, and unfortunately for me at the time, I was running an organisation that had been built up for about 40 years or 38 years around physical events. So it was all about engagement, direct engagement, whether it was a trade exhibition, whether it was a conference, whether it was a road show, whatever it was all about events. So not surprisingly, when the pandemic hit, immediately I had a real challenge because I had to seek alternatives, obviously virtual alternatives. And I have to say I spent a great deal of time investigating a whole wide range of possible alternatives, including some bizarre software from US where we had avatars floating around virtual exhibition stands, some really odd avatars. And I looked at those and I thought that's just never, ever going to achieve anything. Some really bizarre and frustrating, and indeed, of course, yes, anyone who was involved in the pandemic in the membership sector would be aware of the plethora of alternatives that people came up with, whether it was the one-man developer in their bedroom developing some software, or whether it was a major blue chip provider. I had some positives in the pandemic. I created some good alternative communities. I didn't really provide much in the way of alternative events because, and this is something that's beyond the pandemic, when the pandemic stopped, and I immediately hoped that everything would come back to normal, apart from the obvious fact that, of course, every time I started looking at a physical event again, the costs of putting that event on had sort of doubled, trebled, well beyond the budget, and we couldn't put the members' fees up to compensate for that because we were lucky to have the members still from the pandemic. So yeah, we were trapped. In the pandemic, I put on, 30, 40 webinar all-day events. I got involved with every single collateral going on out there. I got involved with a lot of people who were organizing Net Zero Week, Sustainability Week, virtual events. I got involved with just about everything. I signed up for everything, but it was so challenging. And I still know, and I've tried hybrid events. I've tried every type of event since the pandemic. I still know, to me, human interaction is, I think, critical in any real event. The most successful events, and I've been to a lot of events. Used to own a trade show. I run events, I run conferences, and the most successful events have been where you've got good, interesting people. It's the 20% again, the 80-20 rule, the 20% of the membership who have things to say, maybe very controversial things to say, but interesting things to say, you get 20% of that type of people, you get, that membership round a table or in any sort of environment, you have some really great debates. I had one event that went on to 2:00 in the morning. It was, would I want to go into the particular area of work we were talking about? Probably not. But suffice to say that it was a strong area, that there were lots of pros, lots of cons. Yeah, but I think that was a really strong community. Unfortunately, equally, I did try and set up a couple of niche communities, and I do passionately believe in niche membership structures as well. I haven't really said that. I think that where I think the growth is coming in the membership sector again is niche bodies. And there was a period of time when membership bodies were coming together, they were merging, some of them were going out of business. I think there's been an interesting growth in the niche, and I think that's all to do with social media, to do with the World Wide Web. But I did try to set up a couple of niche communities, subsectors. Unfortunately, I tried the hybrid model and it didn't work. Everyone said, no, we want to be in a room. These were communities of about 100 people, not big, not large. So yes, mixed bag about communities and engagement and telling stories, back to telling stories again. But no, I've had some really, really good events. And I think it just comes down to, I love having people in the room like myself. And you'll have gathered I'm not short in coming forward in terms of opinions and views and thoughts. And I love to engage, a bit like that chap I was talking about earlier, where I had that long discussion. Yeah, the pandemic helped to build communities, but I got a little bit disappointed because obviously all of the community building at that point was virtual. And I think the attempts after the pandemic to try and go back to perhaps through a hybrid model is the biggest challenge we have, I think, with membership communication. Yeah, breakout rooms in Zoom, did they work? They worked to a certain extent, but they never seemed to quite have the right people in the breakout rooms. And of course, unlike in a physical room, it was harder to move them around. And people also facilitating discussions, facilitating debates, facilitating panels. Again, harder on a virtual session than in the only positive thing I think that came out of that was podcasts. Interesting, more and more organizations now using that model to communicate and engage with members.
Most importantly, though, did staying up till 2 a.m. with beer solve the problem?
No, because it was an unsurmountable problem. It was a problem where the sector was that particular country we were in. We were in, yeah, we were in Ireland. We were in Dublin. So yeah, that particular country had a very radically different view about the sector than the rest of UK. Sorry, not the UK. The rest of Northern Ireland and the UK had a radically different approach to their membership organisation. And that was the debate. So we were never going to change what they wanted to do, and they weren't going to change what we wanted to do. But it was fun, yeah. But just really weird talking about topics that, to be fair, well lubricated and well oiled, because we were in the bar for the last bit of that debate.
No, but I take as my key learning here that is really the discussions with real life people that create a memorable experience and a strong event, not so much the venue itself. But if you take 5 people into a room and they have really something to discuss, to share, and something gets out of that, it's better than having a room of 1,000 people and no real engagement, right?
I think so. Some of it comes down to basic body language and issues like that, where if you don't have someone in front of you, it really is hard, I think, to really get that debate running.
What creates the strongest possible experience within any event you have attended?
Well-briefed experts, people who understand everything that they need to understand and are willing to debate and willing to discuss. And that, plus the human interaction, I think is what makes the best possible event. You need really high quality speakers, high quality experts in their field. And I think the best attended events and the best events are those where you really learn something. You get good, solid knowledge out of that event. I've never stopped wanting to get involved in events where I know that I'm actually going to learn something. Even if I've got to travel a long way, or if it's virtual, if it's an early morning overseas, whatever. For me, it's all about knowledge and learning and understanding. And if you get that out of an event, that to me is the most important thing. If you're putting an event on, make sure you've got good quality speakers that the members are going to want to listen to and understand and get a lot out of.
It's not only the presentations, it's not only them talking to the audience, it's really the ability to get into a one-to-one conversation.
Yeah, debate. Sorry, you're right. Debate. debate and panel is good. Panel, I love panels. Well-informed panels with a good facilitator. I'd listen to good quality panels all day, because if you've got a good chair, good facilitator, I think panels are a brilliant way of drawing out that discussion.
Let's go into the final chapter, so to speak, of our strategies and engagement formats, let's call it like that, which is community building. Could you highlight again how an organization, a member organization, really use different methodologies, different frameworks, different initiatives to really create a strong and lasting community with their members, but also other stakeholders, their entire ecosystem, so to speak?
I think, interestingly, the younger they are, the easier it might be to create an effective community. If you're coming into an adults, I mean, the older we get, the more set in our ways we are, and trying to build that community. I did make some inroads into that community, building the energy user community. There were a couple of existing organizations that represented them. So I said, well, look, can we have a piggyback approach? Can we borrow one of your meetings to try and, build that discussion? But yes, I was a bit frustrated with that, because whilst I think ultimately it would have helped the members a lot more, because you would have had the steer from the clients what they wanted, what they felt would be good solutions for their buildings, their property. Although that's the other thing, time to build communities is disappearing. Yeah, it's that, because I had to say to people, look, this is not going to happen quickly. I mean, if you're a government, you can set up a citizen assembly relatively easily, because you've got access to the poll register, the electoral register. You can work out ways of setting something like that up quite quickly. If you're a membership organization, it isn't quite as simple as that. You've got to do it in other ways. But the urgency and the sense of bringing that community together quickly, if the members felt it was going to take too long, then that was the problem. They said, well, you're building using our money, which we really want you to spend on what's happening now and not what's going to be happening in. And of course, with young people, well, I think they'll make a very good community and potentially engage. But again, you're asking for members' forbearance, because you're saying, well, hang on a minute, this spend might not immediately, obviously benefit you and your business now. It may well benefit your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and hopefully will benefit the human race going forward. But it's still the hardest job, I think, is to build a community. Building a community of the world's biggest companies was nigh on impossible, because each company regarded themselves as a community anyway. They had everything they needed. But yeah, I focused on SMEs. For me, my communities have often been around the sole trader, the sole practitioner, the small player, the people who sometimes don't have the ability to have a voice that's heard, or it's harder for them to have that voice. Again, different between a professional body, obviously, where it's an individual as member, and a trade association where it's the business that's the member. The communities I've had more success with have been, to be fair, in the professional body space, because there you pick up on niche areas that regard, what some people call them special interest groups. You could equally call them communities. It's that feeling of people with shared interests that in itself is a community. And ironically, some of the better solutions now to our members are engaging with are community-based again, community energy. We talked a lot about community energy solutions when I was at my previous organization. That was important. If we're trying to solve building decarbonisation issues, let's do it by local street by street, not by trying to solve the whole country's problems in one go. Take a problem, build a community to help solve that problem. Targeted community area, so if you're looking at a particular area geographically or a particular type of house.
And
yeah.
For me, one of the things that, with member organizations, there's less of a competitive need. Obviously, there is a need for competitive, but it's not like business to business where, businesses are all competing. But I still think there's a reticence to build these kind of networks and these kind of ecosystems that share knowledge, share innovation, share how we can build, how we can reduce the, impact of the climate emergency. Why do you think there is that reticence if usually competitiveness isn't as big a deal as it is in, say, the B2B market or the B2B?
There is there are still some competition issues, Jonathan, in the sector, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I used to have the discussion. Again, it's more relevant with trade associations where you're talking about business to business, because clearly getting a number of businesses in the room or virtually to discuss solutions, you've got to be careful. I have had some examples where I had some of the virtual stuff that I put on in the pandemic, for example, where we had some quite good presentations, but at the beginning of each presentation, one or two people were saying, you can't share any of this because our IP is buried in this presentation. Now, I felt like turning around and saying, well, really, come on, what are we about? Are we trying to help people solve problems? Unfortunately, that would never have changed. So you're always got to accept that there will be competitive issues, both within an organization and in some sectors within, yeah.
How do you overcome it, though? I suppose?
How do we overcome it? Right. We do. There's some really good, strong initiative going on at the moment called Climate Action for Associations, which is literally pulling together a lot of work that associations are doing around net zero, both internally and externally. So in our case, we're a solution provider for, so our members can provide some solutions. That's the sort of collaboration where it's all about actions. It's about providing strong measurement capabilities, data capabilities, actual practices, templates, documents, guidelines, tangible actions that will help provide solutions. That doesn't mean to say that within that federation model, there are still structures that are fighting each other, or organizations that wouldn't sit down around a table normally and talk to each other. What I want to do is use membership to the most effective way that it can, and where I can punch above my weight. I've always tried to use my membership, whatever it is, whatever size of organization, to maximize its achievements through punching above its weight, whether that is mainly through collaboration, obviously with bigger organizations. Yeah, it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it is easy. Nothing I've mentioned today as a membership engineering solution is easy. Some are easier than others. Shared things, I mean, and again, when you've got the government, so obviously in the construction sector at the moment, you'll be painfully aware health and safety has become a really important issue. And that for once we've got a situation where the sector's working in one way, the government's working in one way. There's a lot of collaboration there to get the problem solved, because that problem is serious and it's life-threatening and it's critical. And so that's a good example where actually membership is really helping. It is to a certain extent, although we have got to sort out the fact there are a lot of different registers for members operating their profession. So we've got to unify that together. That's critical. Again, the risk is everyone sets off on their own path and creates their own, whatever it is, their own structure. That's all right in some areas, but if it's life-threatening, it's critical, it's national importance, you've got to override those things and say, no, this is the solution. We want you to provide a solution that where everyone works together and creates one structure.
I think, Mervyn, we discussed now in quite some detail how member organizations can create positive impact, how they can create stronger engagement between their members and other stakeholders. Let's really look a little bit deeper into what is preventing them to do that. So let's come to challenges. What do you think are the strongest or biggest challenges out there for membership organizations right now that prevent them from creating positive impact or prevent them from creating real engagement between their different stakeholders?
Am I allowed to use the small P word? Politics, geopolitics, the world in which we live, which seems to have slightly, have we lost the plot? We seem to be in a world where everybody wants everything like now. People have very little patience. The governments feel that they need to be game changers in some examples, or in other examples, the opposite, where they want to just be more of the same, business as usual. We have a world where people are quite frightened to put their head above the parapet and say things or talk about things. That makes membership quite a lot harder because, as I've said already, for example, a good example, I think we have lost, associations, certainly trade associations have lost, and it's frustrating, have lost that ability to help guide and influence governments in terms of policy creation. And that's a challenge, because you might think, well, why would membership? But a lot of expertise tends to be within the membership organizations, and not, as governments in the past have thought, sitting at running NatWest Bank or running big global player. And to me, that's a big issue, and that's a challenge. I mean, by far the bigger challenge is the World Wide Web. because all of a sudden, I mean, that's why there were books written not that many years ago around membership is finished, the end of membership as we know it. I can't remember the title of the book. There was someone who wrote a book about membership is over, membership is finished. And that was all about the fact that why would anyone pay to get information out of an organization? Because you can find it everywhere. You could, especially now with the wonderful world of AI, and we haven't mentioned it at all on this discussion. I'm certain it will be many, many future discussions around AI and how AI can influence. In the world of AI, where people can almost become their own expert, either in written form or in research form, if it depends again back on why are you part of a membership organization? What is that membership organization about? Is it information? Is it networking? Is it being part of the greater good? Is it reputational? Do you belong to it for reputational reasons? In the sinister world, do you belong to it for lobbying reasons, which is back to the government thing, but on a slightly different aspect around creating policy? It's actually influencing policy. Again, I'm pragmatic, I'm realistic. I've done a lot of lobbying of governments in the past through membership organizations. So I'm very aware of that issue. If governments stop listening, that's a big challenge for any membership organization. As I found out with my energy efficiency, government didn't want to hear the message about energy efficiency. They wanted nuclear, they wanted carbon capture, they wanted everything that was large and future and expensive. They didn't want simple, existing and cheap or low cost. Not cheap, low cost, high value. And the only other thing I suppose, and this is the biggest aspect, is intergenerational activity. The biggest worry about our young people, our young generations, future generations, is their readiness for work, readiness for work, readiness for a life. Now, you might say, well, what's that got to do with membership? For me, community, membership, what's the difference really in many respects? If they don't want to engage with others, with other children, other humans, I think the world is in a really seriously bad space. It's going to get worse, especially if we do not, as I said, try and engage with our young people. Now, because of the massive disparity between my age group, the baby boomers, right down to generation, whatever it's now called, we've got about 50, 60 years of different generations, all with different aspirations, different with ideas, different with thoughts. Yeah, we have a serious intergenerational issue, which I don't know. Membership organizations have all started up, well, not all, but many have started up young professionals, women in groups, men in groups, whatever it is, whatever the different type of subgroups are. I'm taking a seriously optimistic alternative view at the minute. I'm saying, let's stop this worrying about having a separate group for each type of person or each age of person or each anything. Let's work better on bringing age groups together, mentoring, sharing knowledge, imparting knowledge, helping people with their careers. That, I think, should be the future of membership. We've got to help young people through their lives. And I think it's going to get harder and harder and harder, whatever it is, whether it's job, economic, whatever it is. And membership can be that, I think, can help that solution. But yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, Rennie, that intergenerational aspect where you've got to it's back to keeping everybody happy all of the time, and keeping an 18-year-old happy at the same level as keeping a 69-year-old level interested all the time is bloody hard work. I'm trying to improve our engagement with our student members. I haven't mentioned our engagement at CIET. We do have an issue with bringing our young graduates through and taking them into membership. They're all finishing up their degree programs now. I'm quite concerned that we need to seriously engage with our student members. I say our student members because what we don't want them to do is they get their free membership while they're doing their degree. They stop doing their degree. I'm trying to say, look, there's a good, solid reason why you should carry on as a member. Hardest job is persuading a graduate who's probably not got any money, who's in debt to £50,000, saying, well, of course you want to join a professional body. Why wouldn't anyone want to join a professional body? And they look at you and say, well, so what is a professional body? What are you doing for us? How can you in any way help us? We're not bothered about post-nominal letters after our name. None of that's relevant. We're not really interested in a certificate anymore. What we want is career support, a job. We need help. We need to find a job. Yeah, I'll never stop being passionate about that issue.
You also mentioned National Trust earlier, and I know it was last year there was a whole thing about they were trying to attract new members with regards to the kind of practices they were taking on. They were being more, aware of the types of things that were in the politics, which then led to them ostracizing their older, as you called yourself boomer, the people that had grown up not wanting those types of things. And I suppose you've talked there a lot about intergenerational demand, so it wasn't really about that. It's, does that make organizations more resistant to change? Because as you said, it's the 80-20 thing. Are they going to just sit there and think, why should I bother trying to attract the younger generation that will end up ostracizing my older generation or the older members? And I just worry that there's a kind of catch-22 situation.
No, there is. It's tradition. It's back to that wonderful word that, regrettably, Jonathan, we can't change. I can't change that, and it's most frustrating for me is the tradition, because whilst a lot of the underlying UK concept, I think, has always been tradition. It's been one of the biggest points around the UK, this whole traditional piece. I have been involved with too many membership bodies where it's the way we've done it. We have these committees, we have these structures, we're really resistant. And even occasionally where something suggests like setting up a young professionals group, for example, and the view of many, I mean, and to be fair, membership has the same challenges that every other business has. People tend to forget it's not for profit, but you still have to have a surplus. You still have to pay salaries. You're still employing people. And that's the other part of the balancing act. If you are adopting something that is radical, is different to others, you have to accept that there will be members, back to the 80-20 rule, there will be members who will vote with their feet and say, we don't think that XYZ and National Trust, whoever, we don't think XYZ should be going in that direction. For that reason, we're not renewing. And I've lost members for that very reason. I know I have. But yes, it's just that overarching piece where you know that there will be many organisations in the UK, as indeed in the world, where it will be business as usual, as long as they can carry on, as long as they can keep going. I'm hoping and praying we'll get some more younger people coming into association membership leadership situations. Back to my education piece about a profession, a career path. All the young people I see coming into different parts of membership, different aspects of membership.
Let's wrap it up. Taking all your decades of experience working in membership organizations in very, very different sectors, if you see a member organization that is really struggling with retention, that is really losing members constantly, that fails to engage their members to really create positive impact or show them how they create positive impact already, what would be your one top tip for them to say, this is what you need to change, and from tomorrow you will be more successful?
Very tempted, to be honest, Rennie, on that basis, I would be tempted to say, close the organisation. No, this is too drastic. I was going to say, close the organisation down and restart, reinvent no, that would be a case of reinventing the wheel. I said earlier about not reinventing the wheel. To be frank, if it was that bad, you would need to reinvent the wheel. And almost one by one, obviously depending on how many thousands of members, but you would certainly need a very strong, active piece of very urgent engagement with the members, ideally like a citizen assembly, but getting as many members into a space as you can and saying, hey guys, look, clearly this is not working. We're not working. We don't think this is working. You'd have to really almost start from ground zero. I think. I don't think any consultant could come into a space like that and say, this is easily solvable. I've often inherited jobs where I've had those sorts of problems, not quite to that scale, to be fair, not where the whole thing is falling to bits, but not far off in one case where members were clearly not happy, but that wasn't reflected in what I'd been told. But it was becoming obvious when I picked up all the files and saw all these letters and all these complaints. How on earth did I ever manage to keep that organisation running? It's still going, I have to say, still up and running. Yeah, I suppose that was a real baptism of fire early on for me, but I didn't quite completely rebuild, but I did actually address the building as in committees. We changed the committee structure. That helped. We changed the regional structure because that also was a big issue in that organisation. So, yeah, rebuild either from ground zero if the organisation is just completely, as in your case, shot to pieces, or rebuild parts. Keep the bit that you think can, bit like anything really, if you can salvage something, keep that, but rebuild what's around it, a bit like a building. So once I'd found out those challenges, which was the most important aspect. I mean, data, everyone will tell you data is critical with any membership organisation, and not just data as in percentages of, but data as in knowledge of, so understanding challenges, problems, members' concerns.
Great. My hope for this conversation, and we definitely achieved that, was that we get really broad, set the scene for the wider stakeholder impact forum to really let others fill in the gaps we left. And I think there are wonderful things we opened up now today, and we can go really into more detail with other conversations. But
I think it's a fantastic project, Rennie. I really do. You know, this is great. This is the sort of forum we need.
And this is my last question. You opened it up nicely for me. What makes this initiative so powerful in your opinion? Why are you taking part?
So talking to peers, people with far better knowledge than me, greater knowledge than me, having done it, you know, I've only done it for 25 years. I've worked for 50 years, so I've got 25 years of commercial experience plus 25 years of membership. But there are people out there who've got 30, 40 years of experience in membership and knowledge and experience and more worked examples, more better case studies. Yeah, the more of that sort of knowledge and information we can bring together and work together with and collaborate and share each other's, you know, how we solve things, how we didn't solve things. Yeah, we just need to be doing these things as interactively as possible so we can gain lessons out of the things. But yeah, that's to me the most powerful thing. For me, this is a really exciting option of having that sort of global or that bigger picture view of membership, and just really honing in on, as you've said, the things we've discussed today, but in numbers. So we've got multiple viewpoints. That's exciting. I'm really quite looking forward to hearing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole set.
Great, excellent. No, thanks, Mervyn, for sharing all your insights today.